Hey everyone, welcome to Be the Change. My name is Lily Mott, and today's episode is about how change comes when you're willing to listen. My guest this week is Millicent Wenlock, who is an advocate for social justice, sustainability, and inclusivity. Millicent is also an estranged and care-experienced young person, so as this week is Estranged Students Solidarity Week, Millicent joined me to discuss her experience. So without further ado, I'm excited to share this conversation with Millicent Wenlock.
I'm Millicent Wenlock, and I recently graduated university, but my activism started very much on estranged students and their care experience. It is a very different journey into activism because I kind of stumbled into it, and it just sort of happened that I was homeless and I was in this space where I felt like there was never a care experienced or estranged students around me at my university. And I just felt so disconnected from everyone else that I just felt like I had to do something. And then I found the Unite Foundation, and they offered me this like amazing part-time job, which was just enough to like sort of cover the grocery bills. So I just thought, you know what, this is really nice entry level role to get some experience. So I tried it out, and I just fell in love with it. And I just sort of discovered, oh my God, this is my purpose. And I just became really passionate about helping estranged and care experienced students because care experienced students get a lot of protections and a lot of support from the local authority, and estranged students often get nothing from the universities and the colleges. So that's where that came from. And then I kind of just really spiraled from there. I explored environmental science and conservation, fell into disability and neurodivergence, and then it just really sort of spiraled from there, and I got to explore all the different amazing passions that I have.
Amazing. And that is how I came to know you, is through all of these amazing passions and the work that you do. I guess I want to take it back because, of course, it is Estranged Student Solidarity Week. And I think the term estranged is something that, being in the US, I hadn't heard that term before because I think we call it different things, or maybe we don't have a term that means the same thing. But can we take it back to kind of the very basics? Can you tell me what it means to be estranged, what that term means? And then also you did mention care experience young people as well. I'm going to ask you to kind of take us back to the basics, give us the foundation. But if you will, can you explain some of those terms?
Yeah, the sort of rundown of it is estrangement means you have no contact with the person that you've decided to become estranged from. So it varies from who you're speaking to, which is really interesting because you could become estranged immediately, which is really strange because when you go to Street Finance England or Street Finance Scotland or Wales, for example, it's usually a year that you have to wait before you're classified as estranged, which is really bizarre if you need that support now. And yeah, it's really interesting because you don't have contact with that person, but care experience is usually when the state has intervened. So they might have taken you from your childhood home, you might be adopted, you might have gone to live with another relative. That's called kinship care. And it's very different depending on your circumstances and what the state has decided is safest and best for you in terms of safeguarding. So it can vary very different for every single child, and no two experiences are ever the same. So it's very interesting to hear from other people as well in terms of different counties have different definitions of care experience as well. So, for example, Liverpool has a very different definition from Cambridge, and sometimes you're not classified as care experienced if you haven't stayed within the system for 13 weeks, even though you've experienced that very traumatizing, difficult system. So it's different for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's probably one of the big challenges is navigating your system, but also if you happen to move and all of a sudden then things change. And I know, of course, a lot of people experience this in uni and might be having to move to uni. I feel like there's so many challenges. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the challenges that you've faced throughout your journey with this. And then I would love to also talk with you about all of the amazing things that you've done recently and how we came in contact, because I think I want to paint this whole picture of you, that you have this experience and you've faced these challenges, but what you've done with it is incredible, Millicent. So tell me about some of those challenges, and then I want to talk about more of your activism and the work that you're doing now.
Yeah, for me, it kind of all started in my second year of university. I studied at University of Stirling in Scotland, which was lovely. It was nice. I had a lovely flat in this amazing place. And I was put on this care experience internship, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm going to get experience. So I was so excited for this conservation internship that I was doing. And I started to panic about mid-March when I was told they'll sort my accommodation out, it's fine. They kept gaslighting me, which was so frustrating because I just had this gut feeling that something was wrong, and I just felt something was not right. So come mid-April, I was due to be out mid-May of my place, because that's when my tenancy agreement ended, and I needed somewhere to live for the summer months whilst I was not able to live in that flat. So I sort of thought, well, I'll put an application in. Surely they've got some, they're housing all these summer school kids. Surely they've reserved a spot for all the kids they've just put on this internship that they know don't have any family to go home to. And yeah, about 2 weeks before I was due to be evicted out my flat, they turned around and said, actually, we don't have anywhere for you to live. Just let you know that some school kids have all taken their spots, and we knew you were coming, but not our problem really. So then I ended up moving to Aberdeen, which was really strange because I was going to have to commute from Aberdeen to Stirling, which is, for context, over 2 hours on the train. So commuting that far in the morning is not particularly appealing to anybody, but it was the only affordable place to live, so that's what I did. Yeah, I sort of joined My Life My City in 2023, which was amazing. And I went for my first Next Gen, and I met Lily, which was delightful. And I met all these other people that had the same passions as me and different passions. And I just got to hear so much about democracy, which I was always fascinated in, but I wasn't actively participating in, which is where I just sort of picked up another thing. And I was like, yeah, I'm just going to join a squad. I'm going to put that application in. And it just sort of convinced me to get more involved. So I just found all these amazing people and just sort of ended up finding loads of new friends at the same time, which was so nice.
That's wonderful. I'm so glad that you've found that community. And of course, now you're a part of I Will as well, which I think opens up even more in that sense of passionate people who are based all across the UK. And yeah, I'm so happy that we met and now we get to have these conversations. And now you're sharing your story with me as well, because I listened to your episode on the Forgotten Generation podcast and loved it, of course, but happy that we get to chat now. Can you tell me about what work you're doing now? I know that you're involved in a ton of different organizations. Of course, My Life, My Say, I Will. Can you tell me about being a trustee as well? Tell me about that process. Tell me about some of that work that you do. I know you've got a million different roles, so touch on a few of them.
Yeah, for me, my first trustee role was the Students' Union, which was fascinating at 19 to just be sort of dropped into that. But at the same time, I was the youngest person in that room. And I know, everyone says we're the future, but I hate that because I'm constantly, looking at all these adverts that are telling me I'm the future. No, I'm sat here in the present, let's get on with it. And I just find that so interesting because I learned so much, and I think that's where my activism sort of deepened in terms of I learned so much so fast, hands-on, because nobody else was giving you sort of instructions. You were just getting on with it, making decisions. It's very interesting because there's so little trustees that are under 30. There's 3%, which is kind of abysmally depressing, really, considering the amount of times I look at the charity sector and they're like youth participation, co-production, and it's Yeah, but nobody on your board is actually of an age of that generation, and you're telling us that we're important to your charity. So it's a big thing that I'm passionate about. And in 2024, I joined the Character movement, which is what I chair now. And I just love it because it's very lived experience led, very trauma informed. We're supporting young people. We gotta dive into things and topics that are very much a bigger issue that some organisations don't want to touch. At the moment, we're trying to put together a campaign about language and why language matters, because we need a universal care experience definition before they try and put in more legal laws and stuff around care experience. So we're trying to move forward on that, which is proving difficult because there's a new number of councils. So it's a big challenge.
I think that is the perfect segue into my next question. But what are the best ways for people to support? Of course, we'll come at this from two different camps because you're involved in two different ways, but to support estranged students and then also to support care experienced young people, students. What are the best ways for people to support the work that you're doing, maybe learn more? Do a little shout out of your organizations that you work with, yourself, more resources people can check out. How can people support and learn more?
For me, I think it's being willing to listen to activists like myself, because you've got to listen to these people, and there's so much stigma around estrangement. The biggest thing I always get told is that they're your family, and it's usually very frustrating because my experience was so, it had to be done. It wasn't a choice. It was like survival in terms of I desperately wanted to go to university and they didn't want that. And when I went to university, I found that freedom and those choices I didn't have before. Some of the things I'd never experienced on my own. I'd never had independence in my life before that. So I think there's so much stigma around estrangement and people just thinking that you're being over emotional and petty with your family members. And often young people are making decisions that are for their own benefit and to sort of improve their lives in ways that, maybe the people that they're estranged with don't understand. And it's very difficult because a lot of people just always try and go back to the thing of, but they're your family, and obviously there's such a thing as chosen family, and I think that's a big thing as well in terms of, you don't always have to see those family ties as binding if they are damaging you in your life in that way. So it's very important. And obviously with care experience, it's very interesting because I didn't see myself as care experience for a very, very long time. And it was something that I had to come to terms with because there's all these stereotypes about care experience people. And it's usually very difficult to come out of that. But it was when I started to work with the Unite Foundation and I found all those big community that were waiting for me that I was managing at the time. I think that really helped me in terms of just adapting to that. And then I just sort of adapted, becoming more open with the labels that I was putting on myself in terms of I know I'm autistic and I know I'm neurodivergent. So I joined Ambitions About Autism and I said, you know what, I'm going to give my lived experience to these guys too, because that's what I want to do. And I think just listening to co-experienced and strange activists and just be willing to watch their content, following them, being open-minded and being an ally. Sometimes, for example, during Christmas, you could be a really good ally by checking in with those people because they don't have anybody at Christmas. And especially at university, those spaces turn really, really quiet because there's nobody there. So just giving them space to perhaps check in is really quite nice and very much appreciated.
I love that. I think that that was wonderful. And I'm going to ask for a little bit more advice. Lots of young people might want to do some of the work that you're doing and make change, but they might not know how to get started with that work. What advice would you like to share with those people who might be listening?
For me, I think it's just being brave enough to put yourself out there, because a lot of people always tell me, oh, you're so inspirational. I actually had somebody message me last night. It's like, is this you? And I was like, yes. And I was like, you just got to put yourself out there. You've got to apply to stuff. You've got to be willing to look in unusual places, right? And often these opportunities that people like me and you apply for are in the most obscure websites you'll ever find, which is why Molly, my very good friend, creating youth opportunities. And there's hundreds of opportunities going into that every day. We just send each other opportunities like, look what I found. Would you like to share it with the website? So that's always something that I'm championing because I just love that initiative that Molly created. And I'm just so passionate about like get everyone on the level playing field because everyone deserves an opportunity to have their voice heard. And for me, no action is too small because everyone's like, oh, you have to do all these big things in Parliament. And I don't believe that's true. I think kindness is very underrated and that it's just very key that you're willing to try. And for me, like when you get to my stage, you just find very ordinary people very inspirational because, it's the willingness and commitment to try something and to give it a go. And I think that's just so nice because everyone expects me to say someone really famous, but not for me. So I just think it's so different that everyone else knows they've got a shot of giving inspiration to someone else that they might not think would find inspiration in them as well.
It was so wonderful to talk with Millicent and to learn more about what it means to be care experienced and estranged. I'm so grateful to Millicent for sharing her story and all of her wonderful advice on how we can all support care experienced and estranged people. Millicent is sharing lots of content this week for Estranged Students Solidarity Week, so if you'd like to learn more and follow along with Millicent's work, please check out her social media accounts in the description of this episode. But before you head off, I want to leave you with one last piece of Millicent's advice. Change comes when you're willing to listen. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and you can find Millicent on Instagram and LinkedIn, and I included those links in the description of this episode. If you want to talk about anything I mentioned, please reach out to me by email at lily@bethechangepodcast.org or on Instagram at @BeTheChangeMediaNetwork. I am working on expanding Be the Change Media Network, which means bringing you more inspiring stories from amazing guests. If you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate it if you could leave the podcast a rating and a comment because it will help these stories to reach, educate, and inspire more people. And I would also love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Tune in for my next episode. But until then, be the change you wish to see in the world. Bye, guys.